we are starting out with Bitcoin. What we want to do here is first give us a framework for the length of the cycle and how the cycle is going to function. From there, we can start to make some predictions on our assets, which of course we will start with Bitcoin. Up on the screen here, if you're watching, you can see a chart with a whole lot of lines. You're probably like, what is going on here? I'm going to walk us through what this is. So first things first, I just want to look at these green and red lines. What these are, the tops is the green and the bottom is the red of each of the past Bitcoin cycles dating back to 2014. Okay, so we have 3 cycles, 2013 actually. We have 3 past cycles. And the reason why I wanted to do this is I just want to get an idea of the average length of cycles. Now, the interesting part from this is they are very, very, very similar. So if we look at from green to red in the first cycle, so top to bottom, we're looking at about 396 days. In the second cycle, 365 days. And in the third cycle, once again, exactly 396 days. So pretty wild. So we have a pretty good idea of what the length from top to bottom anyway of the next cycle should be. The other thing we can look at is from top to top of each cycle. Again, when we look at that between the first and second cycle, we see 1,461 days. When we look at it from the second to third cycle, we see 1,400 days. So very close, about 2 months off. And so we can make an average of that and guess around 1,460 again for this coming cycle. And what these numbers give us is an approximate, and again, this is not perfect by any means, but it gives us an idea that somewhere around October of 2025 should be close to the top of this coming cycle. And then the bottom would fit somewhere around November in 2026. So again, not perfect by any means, but we can guess that they are somewhat along those lines. Now, why can we guess that? Well, there's a few sort of reasons why people think these cycles are so specific. Part of it is because of the Bitcoin halving. These happen every 4 years. They're a known time. And so typically people tend to think that this is what creates these cycles is the inflation rate of Bitcoin is cut in half. And so there's less supply on the market, which creates a bull run. I don't think that's the case. I think that's a coincidence, but definitely has some part of the structure. I think what's really causing these is liquidity cycles. And so what we've seen since the financial crisis back in 2007 is governments reset interest rates back to zero, and they have these sort of liquidity cycles that they've been doing. And this is the US, China, Japan, Europe, all the biggest nations in the world. And basically they print a bunch of money and keep interest rates low. And it tends to go about 4-year cycles. And then they tighten things and bring it back. They stop printing money. They might raise interest rates, so on. And so on the screen here, you can see a picture of global liquidity. So this is global liquidity across these nations that are going up and down, the rate of change. And it happens to be around 4-year cycles. And so this is what I believe is a bigger impact on crypto, because this is also what's impacting tech stocks and other assets. And so all assets right now go through these sort of cycles. It's not just crypto. And so I think this is, and this is very accurate on the dates of the tops and the bottoms are very, very similar to that of crypto. It's quite interesting, but that's what I see. And I think the same cycle is going to play out. I don't see why it doesn't. And so I do think these numbers of these sort of lengths here give us a pretty good foundation of the length of the next cycle. Now, from this, we can start to make some predictions based off of when we think the top will be in, which, as I said, is October 2025. So then what we can do is we'll start with just a typical price prediction here of these assets. So if we look at this like blue, white, and purple or pinkish line that's going up here, this is a trend line, a regression channel. And basically what this is looking at is network-based technologies. So technologies that become more valuable as more people come on top of them and use them. Think of like a telephone, the internet, et cetera. These are all network-based type technologies, Apple, Amazon, et cetera. They all have a similar growth pattern where they grow in this sort of exponential way over time. And they will often, so the gray line here is your sort of trend line. And then they can get oversold and they can get overbought. The blue is overbought. The purple here is oversold. Crypto, for example, has been in the oversold, or Bitcoin is the chart that I have up here, has been oversold for the last little while. Of course, we've been in a bear market. But if you've never seen this before, I can show you it for basically any big tech company. Here's Apple, that's had the same following this regression channel since 2002, since after the dot-com boom. And I can go along for Google, Amazon, they all follow the same thing. Now, the rate of increase is different depending on how fast the technology itself is growing, but ultimately, it's a really good indicator of growth of network-based technologies. And so we can do something as simple as, let's just follow these charts here. As you can see, in each bull market, we go well above the trend line, and then in the bear markets, we go below. Now, over the last cycle, we went less, right? So we were 2 standard deviations is what it's called, overbought in the last 2 cycles. And then the previous cycle, we were only 1 standard deviation overbought. And we went more than 1 standard deviation oversold in this bear market. So we can assume, do we go back to trend line? Do we go higher than trend line, et cetera? Whatever that is, we can make an assumption here. And so if I just put my mouse here on the trend line itself on October 1st, 2025, I just go back to the mean reversion. So back to the trend line of the growth of Bitcoin, we reach $434,000 per Bitcoin. Again, if you're just listening on the podcast, you might want to be watching this on the screen because it's just much easier to understand. So that's if we make it back to trend line. If we go to 1 standard deviation above trend line, which is what we did last cycle, we would be up at $1.06 million per Bitcoin. Now, that's a bit crazy, but it's not out of the cards, I would say. Now, let's say we don't even go back to trend line for whatever reason. Let's say we just stay on the trend line we're on, which is 1 standard deviation oversold. We've never had that in the bear market, but it's definitely possible. Then we are looking at a $182,000 Bitcoin. Again, if we go to Apple, their first 2 big cycles also were 2 standard deviations oversold, and then they went down to 1, and now they kind of stay below / on trend line, right? Hasn't really gone over that. Now, Apple's, decades old company, whereas Bitcoin is not. So I would think that Bitcoin continues to outperform and probably reaches trend line. But again, it doesn't mean it's going to happen by this date. This is a theoretical date that we made up based off previous assumptions. So again, don't quote me on these, but it gives you sort of an idea of where prices could go if we look at this. Now, this is just one. What we want to do is look at more areas. How can we find more areas to assume or make predictions of where this price could potentially go? So the next one I want to look at is, let's compare Bitcoin to other assets. Now, Bitcoin is the largest crypto asset, so we can't really compare it to any other crypto assets, but Bitcoin is known as digital gold. And so one thing that people will often compare it to is gold itself. And so the market cap for gold is around 12 trillion, okay? Bitcoin's market cap is currently sitting at 141 billion. In the last cycle, it did get up to about 1.25 trillion. It was a 10x away from what gold has done, and we're currently more than 10x away from gold. So is it possible that that's somewhere that Bitcoin could get to? Potentially, but that seems a little bit crazy. Let's just look. If Bitcoin did reach gold's market cap, then basically what that would give us, if Bitcoin was at a $12.5 trillion market cap, that would give us a price point of $595,000 per Bitcoin, which isn't far off from what I said if we just reach the trend line of Bitcoin's market cap in this cycle. To me, that seems a bit far-fetched to get that high if it was to compare to gold, which obviously is a better version of gold, in my opinion anyway. Then maybe it could reach something like that. Or maybe it gets some sort of percentage of gold's market cap. It doesn't necessarily have to get exactly there, but there's just another idea to give you sort of a potential price point that it may get to. Now, I've got one more that we can do here for Bitcoin, and that would be looking at Bitcoin dominance. And so one of the things that is quite interesting here is we can look at Bitcoin dominance from each cycle. And so again, on the chart here, I have the Bitcoin dominance. This is basically the percentage of Bitcoin's market cap compared to the total crypto market cap. And so if we look at this here, we can see the tops of each cycle of crypto. And generally at the top, Bitcoin's percent dominance becomes the lowest because you have all these other tokens that are growing as well. And so if we look at the top of each cycle, it's at basically its lowest point each time. And so 2 cycles ago, we were sitting at about 35%. Last cycle, we hit as low as 38%. And so I just put a trend line of maybe where we'll go. Who knows if it gets lower or higher, but somewhere around 42%-ish of the total crypto market cap. So what we need to do now is let's just look at what the total crypto market cap could be. Again, using our regression channel, using the same green and red lines. And basically what we have here is a crypto market cap of potentially around 15 trillion, okay, by the top of this cycle. If we get back to trend line, if we go 1 standard deviation overbought, we're sitting at about 35 trillion. And for 1 standard deviation oversold, which is around where we are now, but we continue to grow obviously through that channel, we would be sitting at about a 7 trillion market cap. So that gives you a bit of numbers of where the total crypto market cap could go. But now what we want to do is let's look at the Bitcoin dominance and where would that leave us if we hit either one of these marks. And so if we were one standard deviation overbought, the crypto market cap hit $15.3 trillion, assuming what we just did for the dominance here at around the 42%, that would give us $728,000 per Bitcoin. That's if we're one standard deviation overbought. If we just reach trend line of the crypto market cap, which would be the about $7 trillion market cap, then that would give us, $7 trillion market cap of Bitcoin. That would give us $328,000 per Bitcoin. And if we're one standard deviation oversold here on the crypto market cap, that would give us about $147,000 per Bitcoin. So we have a nice range here of somewhere around 150,000 to about 700,000, if not more. I guess on the one there we hit over 1 million. So really what we're looking at here, if we were to take everything that we just looked at, the market cap dominance, if we were to look at the price predictions around gold, and if we were just to look at the regression channel and just what it would be if it was overbought, oversold, or reaches trend line, we're looking around a low of like 147,000 to 188,000 for Bitcoin. That seems pretty reasonable. It is a 3x basically from the previous all-time high of Bitcoin. If we look at sort of the mid-range, we're looking at about a 328,000 to about 595,000 for Bitcoin, which again seems a little bit high, but with ETFs coming in, more demand, then potentially this could be something we hit. I don't think it's an area that we would stay at long if we did, but it's definitely an area that we could hit. And then finally, the kind of bull case, the outrageous case here would be the high of 728,000 to about 1.2 million. There are a lot of people, some people on Twitter that will call for these sort of numbers. I don't think this happens. I think that's just a bit too far out there. The market cap of Bitcoin would be just so large. We'd have to bring trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars into this asset. And I don't think we do that by 2025. I do think maybe by 2030, these kind of numbers are more feasible. But anyway, it's nice to get a range of some sort to give you just an idea of where this could go over the next few years.